You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinezic.
Prepare to be inspired. Welcome back to Native Plants Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I'm Tom Kinezic. I've been excited really about all our guests, but this one in particular I've been looking forward to. I think all of you, especially you, Fran, I think you're going to like this one.
I do too. I do too.
Yeah. So, speaking of likes, we appreciate everyone's support that we've gotten back so far. I know we've been talking about it a lot, but we're really overwhelmed with all the support and feedback we've been getting. So just speaking of likes, make sure that you like and follow, comment, give us a review, and share this podcast, our Native Plant Healthy Planet podcast, with everybody you know. In fact, do it right now. You know what? Go hit pause. When I say go, you hit pause, and then we'll be right here when you come back. So ready, set, pause.
And we're back. So thank you for leaving that 5-star review. We appreciate it. So we really can't express how much we appreciate it. And this episode, particularly that we're doing today, is a reminder to me how little I know about the industry as a whole. Like you tend to get in your little niche and you think you know something, and then you realize there's a whole universe outside of this planet you don't know as much as you think. I've never claimed to be an expert, but I claim to know a lot. So I'm not really today's topic. I'm not really well versed in. So A, I don't want to make a fool of myself, which I have a tendency to do. But B, I'm excited to learn about this from someone who's an expert. So you couldn't ask for a better person to have for this topic. So the whole point of this podcast to me has been to bring in people that are smarter than us, and we've definitely managed to do that.
Yeah.
On every episode. So I think that's why this whole podcast has inspired me in so many ways.
Yeah, and it's been inspiring to me as well. And I think a lot of our listeners have been inspired by this, at least from the feedback we're getting. Thank you to Cotton Clem and Nicole C_B for your recent reviews. We really appreciate that. I've mentioned before, feedback is so important to us, and it's nice to hear about your experience and that it's been a positive one. And we just want more of that feedback as we get more guests, and we want you to introduce other people to the podcast as well.
I mean, the guests have been inspiring. The listeners have been inspiring. It's even really, it's gotten to the point where it's changed my everyday. So I've started birding, just from a lot of our guests being birders. I've been obsessed with pollinator habitat,
as have I.
Yeah, I mean but it's going to like an obsession level. And now I have the planting bug. Now that it's spring, I want to get out and plant. Because of everything being shut down, I actually have a chance to enjoy spring for a change. Typically, spring is our craziest season, but I'm actually getting a chance to enjoy it. But I'm kind of bummed because I'm getting ready to move, so I don't want to start any projects at my house. So I've actually started planting native gardens at my fiance's house, and she is aware of it. I did tell her, I'm going to go off topic for 1 sec. So a few places of employment ago, probably going over 20 years ago, I worked with a gentleman who was obsessed with habitat. So he lived in Wilmington, Delaware, in row homes where it was nothing but grass. No one had trees. And when you would come down the street, you would see turf, woods. And he had his front yard and backyard completely wooded in this strip of row homes, and the amount of birds that he had and pollinators in his yard was amazing. They came. So, but he ran out of room. So what he would do was buy plants and leave work early, and he started planting things in his neighbors' yards before they got home from work. And they would get home and go, "Rob, did you plant this tree in my backyard?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, I did." So he was just trying to do the whole street, regardless of what his neighbors wanted.
He went rogue.
He did go rogue. So I promised not to do that to my fiance at her property, but she has she has great wooded habitat in her backyard, but she really doesn't have a shrub layer, so I need to add a shrub layer. So I was definitely thinking winterberry holly for winter food source, summer sweet for hummingbirds, elderberry not only for pollinators but for us, we wanted the berries. So I'm kind of curious if you have any recommendations for me. I'm asking for help.
Yeah, well,
what do you think?
Also, well, maybe for you guys, but definitely for the birds is Highbush Blueberry.
There's actually a not where we're thinking about it, but she already has them.
Oh, really?
Now my fiance is from Poland, and there is something with people from Poland and blueberries. They love their blueberries. So there's already blueberries there, but not where we're thinking. We need to put some in. Yeah. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Just from a fall color, so it's appealing to people too. You have to fight the birds for the berries, but that's if you're trying to bring in birds, that's a great choice.
That's a great choice.
And then a lot of the viburnums, cranberry viburnum in particular.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
I guess some of them get a little bit big, but some good options for you. So.
All right, awesome. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. Thank you so much.
But yeah, moving on to today's guest. I met him back. I guess it was last summer. We were both speaking at Millersville, and I realized during the keynote session, I was standing with my back against the wall, and he just happened to be sitting next to me and working on his laptop, and I glanced over and. I wasn't trying to be a snoop or anything, but he's working on this really cool picture of a native bee and just touching up and editing all the pictures. And then I kept glancing over. And next thing I know, it's been like 10 or 15 minutes, and I haven't been paying attention to this keynote speaker at all. I don't even remember who it is, who was the speaker, because I've just been watching all the little intricacies and looking at the different parts of the eye of this bee and all the little hairs and watching this guy work on this picture. And it was a stunning picture already, and then with the touch-ups and everything, it was absolutely incredible.
Wow.
So when we started to go into the social distancing episodes of our podcast, where we're having people call in and trying to give our listeners stuff that they can work on at home, even if they're just staying inside, it's something you can look at online or learn or help you garden. This was one of the people that I originally thought of. So Sam, why don't you take a second to introduce yourself?
Sure. This is Sam Droege. I work for the federal government. I work for the U.S. Geological Survey, and my specialty has been in a very broad way figuring out the status and trends of plants and animals. So over the years, I've worked on everything from tardigrades to birds. That was a big part of my career. Amphibians, dragonflies, butterflies. And for the last 20 years or so, I've been spending more and more time on native bees with the idea of looking at how to determine how well they're doing, so their status, and maybe starting a monitoring program, which turned out to be more difficult than I thought. In the meantime, it's a longer story, but I became very, very familiar with the species themselves. We've created a whole set of identification guides, sadly pretty technical ones, not your although we do have a Bees of Maryland, which is meant to be used with a pair of binoculars for people interested in watching bees, watching the native species as well as honeybees, and learning a little bit there. But that's sort of the broad scope. I now spend most of my time working on native bee issues, and it's taken me into their conservation. And I've moved now back onto our research refuge and have a 30-acre compound that we are clawing back from invasive species, something you guys have to deal with all the time too.
Yeah.
And then replanting it with natives. It's a great opportunity in a way because it's not a pretty piece of property in some ways, and it's full of things already living there. So we're not taking a plowed or a farm field and restoring it. We're taking a field filled with all kinds of aggressive weeds and seeing what we can do to flip it to be more native, less invasive, and working with some of the more aggressive native species. And also, I'm sure we'll talk about this some, building in a component of some of the plants, the native plants that have bees that what we would call specialist bees that only go to a small subset of all the plants. So that's in a very broad way where I'm coming from right now.
And to me, the idea of a 30-acre compound to me actually sounds pretty fantastic. But starting with an area overrun with invasives, to me is a much more difficult on-taking than starting with a clean slate. Like, it's clean slate, you get to start from scratch, but invasives are an issue that, especially if you're dealing with a wooded area, that's not going to be easy because you're trying to preserve some things and deal with other invasives. So I can imagine that's quite the on-taking in itself.
Yeah, it's and actually I'm thankful for that. Inside the 30-acre compound, we have no deer. Outside, we have the addition of a lot of deer also. So it's actually a perfect place to do a reality check on working with corrupted landscapes, let's call that, and trying to bring them back. And we're doing different things, and we'll do more as we go along. Everything from the type of what you see mostly out there on YouTube, which is burning everything off with herbicides, to which isn't our preference, to more selective plowing, to simply mowing and then using a brush blade on a string trimmer to edit, I would call it, out the plants that we prefer not to be there, to combinations that involve heavy chip mulches. So we'll see what happens. It'll be ongoing experiment, and I'm actually pretty excited by it.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there will be pictures based on so I'm looking forward.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to this as well.
Yeah, and people can follow us on our Facebook page for the laboratory, and that's where we post these kinds of events.
Fantastic.
Just to give you an example of how long this has been in invasive territory, yesterday I cut down a bush honeysuckle that it had a multi-branched trunk, but some of the individual branches were 12 inches across, and the whole base was probably 30 inches, and it was a tree.
I don't know if I've ever seen that large before. That's crazy.
I think they planted it over 50 years ago when that was a wildlife forage food that they were promoting.
So I'm already going off topic and already going with a question that's not even one that we had written down. So one of the things that struck me as you were going through your bio a little bit and telling us about you was for us, when we're dealing with people in the environmental field, you see their specialty pretty narrowed down. Like we talk to people that just specialize in turtles or things like that, but you've worked with a lot of different categories, which is impressive. Is there one that you prefer over the other? Is there one area that you like dealing with bees more or birds more? Is there one area that you're drawn to?
In a lot of ways, the answer would be no. I got into native bees because there was a need, I thought, to look at the status of pollinators, because they're so obviously integrated into both agricultural systems and to our natural community. And there was a lot of talk about declines, but no data. So that fits our ticket. I didn't know anything about other than cursory kinds of information, having taken several entomology courses. And then over time, I became more and more of an expert because I needed to. And then, but I fall in love with all these different groups that I've studied. This one really resonates with me, and it's sort of I've in a way painted myself into a beautiful little corner because I haven't been able, as I've been able in the past, to replace myself. Okay, I've worked on a certain level of the boring statistical and other design things. Now I'm going to move to a new topic and look at how to work on the status of salamanders or whatever it might be. Yeah. So with this one, the identification issues have become the sort of paramount. It's surprisingly, I think, for most people to hear, is it's not a picture book thing. It's extremely difficult. Even the experts argue over details. You pretty much, even with bumblebees, need a little dead body of a bee to look under the microscope to determine safely to species. And even then, there's groups of bees. There's 4,000 in North America. About 10% don't even have a described name that goes with them. So, and part of that is just few people. It's not something you can do like with butterflies where you catch them and you have advanced amateurs working on it. And a lot of the details are microscopic and subtle. So I have, a long time ago we decided that we needed to create a set of identification guides for people in the field because there weren't any. And in that process became, more and more familiar with the species and did more and more work for people on identifying the species that they had captured as part of a study or a survey themselves. So okay. I enjoy that. That's right in my lane right now. And there are people who are working at very high levels, but really don't feel like I can leave the field at this point.
Mm-hmm. Did you expect it to be that vast? Like, did you know it was going to be as big of an on-taking as it's turned out to be?
No, I assumed when I started that, okay, I don't know how to identify or know much about the details, but I do know how to, set up survey programs and what you look for in terms of bias and variance estimates, and then, do all these calculations and explore different kinds of techniques and evaluate them for the best way to track changes. Then I figured that we would hire someone to do the identifications of the bees. Well, it just turned out that we couldn't find anybody, and when we did find someone, they spent almost all their time trying to figure it out down at the Natural History Collection. Okay. And I was like, all right, this is a problem. Like, they're relatively easy to catch using what we would call bowl or colored traps. But you can't really advocate for people to do surveys and give them all the techniques to capture and curate a collection of bees. And then they're like, okay, well, what are they? That's, not the end game. So that's how we got into the ID stuff. And then it turns out that I had to get more and more involved because there just really, literally were not people available to create these guides. Even back in the day when we actually had money, it became like, okay, I'm just going to have to do this myself. And I enjoy it. So I really can't complain. Yeah. And in the process of lots of collecting, I collect everywhere I go, and when I'm looking at bees, and lots of collaborative stuff, opportunities pretty much with every state and many of the provinces in several foreign countries. I've really been able to use all that experience and collaborative work to get an understanding of how native bees are working the system and their distribution's abundance, what plants they're using, and life histories. And it's endlessly fascinating. You don't need to go to Madagascar to find new species and to have all sorts of life history discoveries.
Oh, that's
although if you want to send me to Madagascar,
we'll work on that. Yeah. It's to me it speaks for the vastness of it when you have an arm of science that is so vast that you have varying opinions or ways of looking at it. Like you think of quantum physicists arguing over different theories, but when you're looking at just something, what I think a lot of people would think of as bees as being narrow, being so vast that there's that much to learn still is pretty amazing to me. I wouldn't have guessed that myself.
So when you think about that, most people have a awareness of honeybees. Culturally, it is the bee, and we have integrated that into our societies for years, even when we brought them over from Europe. So none of the honeybees are native to North America. And we brought them over and we use them. They are in hives. We can look at them. They're in our literature. They're in our poetry, in songs, in cartoons, all these kinds of places. And a lot of people have a relatively high understanding of how honeybees work. But at the same time, think about the fact that we have about 4,000 native species of bees in North America, and then think also of the fact that each of those is equally as complex and different from honeybees as each other, and all of a sudden, you expand upon that point that you made, which is that we have very little understanding of the diversity of what's going on with our native species of bees, because we've been so concentrated on the sort of one-trick pony of honeybees in the system, because the native bees don't give us honey, and they don't have the same kind of, they don't have any of the life history of honeybees, so we rarely see them. Most of them don't ever sting us. They're integrated into our lawns and yards and agriculture and flowers, and certainly all the wildflowers, without any effort on our part. So it's easy enough to just not bother looking at them. But in a way, you can also reflect on this by thinking about wildflowers, which we do know a lot. And we have many, many field guides. There's many, many floras. Until recently, there was only about 10 faunas for bees, but there's, I think, 2,000 plus floras within North America. Just think of that diversity of floral types, of all those different kinds of colors, sizes, shapes, when they bloom, and the complexity of just the flowering parts, and realize that there is a hidden universe of bees, mostly, sometimes it's not bees, but almost always it's bees, that is controlling, working with the plants to create that system in plants. So you can thank bees for all these flowers, because without bees being there, plants obviously have no real reason to expend all this time, money, and effort into things like nectar and pollen that's covered with all kinds of lipids and proteins, and it certainly has no real reason to do all this kind of fancy schmancy floral display, which is the entry point for gardeners and botanists to large extent. So
and the fun,
it's so vastly underrated that that's one of my delights, is to kind of let people in on that little secret that there's a lot going on out there.
And one of the things that we discuss all the time too is that there's always other factors out there working against these things too. Like, we just got something in the mail the other day from a nursery. What was it? A new take on natives.
A new take on natives,
which are clones, and they're always trying to make everything bigger and better and brighter, but that's not necessarily the best
and look
thing.
Different, so you're the only one on the block who has it, and
which isn't necessarily the best for the pollinators. So it's they think they're doing something great, and it's a marketing ploy. And listen, I understand there's a difference between native horticulture and ornamental horticulture. You just, to me, that there's a separation though between the two, and there's a purpose for each. So it's, if you're really doing the right thing for pollinators, you need to do the right thing for pollinators.
So that's an important point. So when you have to begin thinking about, well, how do I help native pollinators? Really, the avenue to do that is by providing them their food, which is always going to be plants and always going to be a flowering plant. When you're dealing with cultivars of native plants, then all of a sudden what you have is a system that has become unhinged from natural selection and has moved into man-made selection.
And so that's a good word, is unhinged.
Yeah.
That's a great descriptor for
all
it.
those factors that you guys just mentioned, such as bigger bloom, longer bloom time, shorter stature, and
different colors,
the doubling of parts from sepals, and all that leads to that energy has to come from somewhere. And because no one is selecting for pollen and nectar anymore, because it's a man-made system, then a lot of times what happens is a lot of the pollen and nectar gets dialed out, because it's all vegetative propagation at that point. And so you, in a very general way, not always, but in a very general way, the more derived, the more it's a cultivar, particularly if you double stuff, the less interest, even though it's a native, that the bees have in that particular plant. Now, sometimes these cultivars are really a found object. In other words, you can look at some of the great stuff that Mount Cuba has done. They certainly are worthy of your show, and they look at a lot of these different varietals and do evaluations, and they have a sort of a quick bee evaluation too. And so sometimes they find, oh my gosh, look at this one, has off the charts in terms of bee use. So there's a lot going on there, but part of that is that it may not be a derived one. It's just like, oh, we found this really interesting sport in this flock species, let's see, or this hydrangea in somewhere out there, and now we are propagating it. And so this is a long-winded way of saying that better to use the the root stock from a native plant society if you're interested in, if your focus is on bees, and be more question the fluorescent colors of coneflowers, for example.
And I'm glad you brought up Mount Cuba, because at some point they're coming on. They've agreed to come on. We're just in the process of figuring out when. And we also with Pinelands Nursery, we're producing a lot of wildflower seed, and they actually came up for a tour, and Sam Hoadley, who's their trial garden manager, actually is going to come back up this summer. Granted, we'll see if we're still social distancing or not, but he's going to come back up this summer to walk through these wildflower fields that we've created, because really you have 6,000 to 12,000 or even more plants of all the same Helenium or all the same Monarda that are all right next to each other, and you see all these subtle differences. It's really evident in the Echinacea purpurea field that we have, where the cones are different shapes and the flower petals from stem to stem are completely different shades of pink.
And I really appreciate the work that Mount Cuba does. Just, Dr. Diglady, who was involved early on, because he had a love for natives and the cultivars. His property had a stream going through the middle that one side was all cultivars and one side was all natives. He introduced Purple Dome Aster and things like that, but he kind of had a love for both. So I kind of he liked seeing the interaction between the two, which I kind of appreciate. And he did a lot of work with Mount Cuba at the beginning. But
and just to show you the value of Mount Cuba beyond its horticultural value is a friend of mine, Matt Sarver. He
friend of ours
Mount
too.
Cuba to do. Pardon?
I said he's a friend of ours too.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so he did a survey of the bees of Mount Cuba, and he specifically targeted the plants that had specialist bees on them. And in doing so, he got a whole series of bees that had never been found in Delaware before, including at least one that on Jacob's Ladder that had not been, that even the nearby states had not recorded it.
Wow.
So it just shows you that you build it and they will come. Some of this is also the fact that if you look, you will find them, because obviously they're not flying in from 2 states away, but they have lived in the area at a low level, and it was only until you had a big mass of some of these plants and someone looked that you found it out. But it just shows that property owners can make a difference, and even small property owners, because bees are small, right? We're not releasing bison into your quarter-acre lot, but by planting these plants, you will invite in almost any of these bee species, and you can have quite a significant impact, just like that person did in that your development that you lived in. One plant. So a rough way to think about this is for every 5 flowers, that's enough pollen and nectar to support one baby bee, let's call it. Okay. So if you do the multiplication, then a clump of a simple cup of black-eyed Susans is a gift, particularly if you're taking it away from lawn.
Yeah. Is there enough historical data for, because on the last podcast that we did with Marcus Gray from Audubon International, we just talked about the loss of habitat, and that seems to be a theme across almost every episode, especially in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic.
Right.
Like, and you mentioned there's 4,000 native species. Do you know, like, is that a decline? Are there ones that have been extinct or have come extinct over the last 20, 30, 40 years due to loss of habitat? I just didn't know if there was enough data or a lot of the data is relatively new.
Well, I can tell you in a very simplistic way that when you build a road, that the land that used to have all kinds of native plants and animals and bees and everything on it has zero. So you can just do the calculations of how much of our landscape in New England or wherever state you want has been zeroed out by houses, factories, row crops, and there's a long list. And then there's a shorter list of things that have been modified in a way that really decreases their value. And depending on how you play it, it could be roadside verges, could be a positive, or it could be a total negative. Lawns certainly are primarily a negative. And on down to this list to even moving into how are our remaining natural areas managed. Are they emphasizing just planting a bunch of trees, all one species, or are we looking for the biodiversity of native plants? So the tracking of bees is really going to be more efficiently done by tracking the biodiversity of native plant communities.
Okay.
If those are healthy and being curated well by by citizens and people and managers in states and counties, then we're probably going to be okay. Backing up one step further to my specialty, which is tracking changes, I can tell you that we don't track them.
Okay.
Right? We have no idea
Yeah.
about the status of these bees, other than we probably can still find. We've looked. Find almost all the species.
Okay.
The only group that has a known problem that's separate from loss of habitat is bumblebees.
Okay.
And that has to do with the introduction, as is so often the case, of an inadvertent introduction of diseases of bumblebees from Europe into the United States because of the trade now in bumblebees for greenhouse production of tomatoes and sometimes other species. So because of that, we had a set of pathogens. Some are diseases, some are other crazy organisms that whack bees. And we've almost certainly lost one species, and another is on the edge. Several others are so uncommon that we're not even sure what edge they're on.
Okay.
And then another series seems to have declined, and then there's other birds, or not birds. I'm looking at a kestrel outside my window. Other bees are, other bumblebees are in trouble. So that's separate though from the habitat. Together it's a little two-fisted punch to the bumblebee crowd.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like anything native or natural to here. Like we see it with trees and shrubs, just with any introduction, even if it's by mistake, emerald ash borer or Asian longhorn beetle or the lanternfly, which is huge now. So it's
right.
It doesn't take much to get that invasive whatever pathogen or insect or whatever it is, just to if you think of the ash forests in Michigan that are just completely devastated, or bacterial leaf scorch here in New Jersey with oaks. We're seeing a decline in oaks that's changing, weekly, just with even the amount of acorns they produce. And it's hard to save all those things when there's so much outside influence, I should say.
Yeah. Go back to the loss of chestnuts, and that significantly changed the composition of eastern forests, but there were a whole series of animal groups, including bees. It's the chestnut and its cousin chinkapin are in a genus that you don't think of them as big pollen-producing groups or having bees, but they produced tons of pollen and nectar during a season, because they bloom like in June, when almost everything is shut down. So And so that shifted a lot of things. There's one bee that we are pretty sure is a specialist only on chestnuts. We're still finding it on chinkapins, and it now seems to be moving back on to these Chinese American chestnut back crosses.
Yeah.
So there's positives there.
There is. Now, I'm sorry.
Impacts are huge on these invasives.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. You've mentioned specialist bees a few times now. Can you discuss the significance of specialist bees? Because it's enough that you've brought it up a few times. So I just would like to go over the importance of them.
Yeah, and this is an emphasis of ours now, particularly as we began to realize that that bees are not just roaming around using whatever pollen and nectar happens to be available on whatever plant that's available. If you were to look at the literature, it's pretty extensive, and you look at the chemical composition of pollen nectar, it is all over the map. The nutrition levels are different, but so are the secondary compounds. There's essentially something between a set of poisons and a set of what will we call it? Detractants.
Okay.
There's probably a better word than that, but they are repellents. And then you do things like swap the pollen loads of different sets of bees, and all the young die. So what's going on is that we know that some bees are only using the pollen. These would be the highly specialized bees, only using pollen from one group. An example would be willow, which people tend, unless you're a honeybee person, you don't even think of them as often as a blooming plant. But they have a set of bees. I think in our area there's 8 species only use willow pollen. No willow, those 8 species are gone. We can go down a list and of the bees that carry pollen. Some bees are parasites of other bees. So of the pollen-carrying bees, about somewhere between 30 and 40% meet our category of specialized, which means that they're using only plants from one family level down to one species level.
Okay.
And then all the remainder are more Catholic in their tastes for pollen, including honeybees, but they all have preferences too. So even the most generalist of bees, honeybees would be on that list, turn their noses up at certain kinds of pollens and nectars even too. They're all designed differently, so all those sizes and shapes of flowers have different sizes and shapes of bees that are optimized to work with a set of plants. So the world is carved up in very different ways for different groups of bees to exploit these different time windows when plants are blooming. So the bees that are out now in the spring are really different from the bees that are out at the end of the summer when you have a golden aster kind of complex doing a lot of the blooming, and you have it's very much emphasizing the composites. Whereas in the spring you have a lot of tree pollen, and then you have all the vernal plants underneath the trees and forests, and it goes on and on. We can look at wetlands, willow, pontidaria, which is pickerelweed, has specialists that are only on that, and it's endlessly fascinating. And at the same time, you're not going to save the bees by simply planting a small set of flowers that may attract a lot of bees, but that would be some of these, and so that's always good. Attracting bees is always good, but you could think of a lot of these kinds of plantings as sort of analogous to bird feeders. So if I were going to save the birds, one approach would be, well, I'll save the birds because I'm going to put up a bunch of bird feeders, and I'll say, look, there are a lot more birds now because of my bird feeders. But we all know that in the middle of the city and in a lot of other places, when you put up a bird feeder, you just get a bunch of, sparrows and starlings. They are birds, but we have to think, when we think of bees, we have to also be aware that it's not a unibody. Like all bees are just like happy as a clam on, a small set of mints and clovers. We, in the largest sense, want to basically augment what the local flora is and bring some of that diversity into our plantings. Now, for big growers like yourselves and people who work on those kinds of things, that's difficult to do because from a production point of view, all of a sudden your costs go way up when you start futzing around with plants that don't particularly want to be, cranked out by the millions.
Yeah.
So it's just an emphasis that we have now to hopefully diversify the plant availability, to work with the local native plant societies, to look at your property and your landscape and see what you can do to increase the already existing plant fauna, which may be repressed. We certainly are doing that here too, and encourage them by often discouraging your invasives, removing plants, allowing disturbance or not allowing disturbance, all depends. And then maybe integrating more into these naturalized landscapes. When you're dealing with houses and plantings, why not goof around with a landscape with a lot of ornamentals and plants that have bees throughout a big chunk of the year for your enjoyment? That's the same like bird feeders. Like we're attracting bees for our enjoyment. We're not necessarily supporting bees. So it's a difference between attraction and supporting. So we want both under different circumstances, but we're trying to emphasize that plantings be used to support bee populations.
Well, one of the things we discuss here all the time is that there's not one package that satisfies everything. There's not one solution that you can just broadly place over it as a blanket and fix it all. If you want a healthy community, you have to remember it's a community, and it supports a lot of different things. It's wildlife, it's plants, it's pollinators, it's insects. And you need a lot of things to support that. It's not just, I'm going to plant this one plant and that's going to solve everything. It doesn't do that. So, it's funny because the light bulb went over my head as you were explaining that. I'm like, well, why don't we have seed mixes that support some of these things?
Yeah.
Or we list, very broadly in our catalog things that support pollinators, but it doesn't get specific.
Yeah.
And maybe that's one place that we can help, because if people want to know this, we need to supply them with that information. We're their resource. We need to get better at that. So immediately I'm like, look at what I'm learning I didn't know, that, and if we don't know, a lot of our customers don't know. So.
Right. Well, it's so obscure. I mean, that information is not common knowledge. Whereas, what's a good bee plant has been common knowledge, because the honeybee people are constantly looking for good bee plants. And so their measure is going to be really different from the measure that the native bee people look at, because the native bees have all these different kinds of requirements, not unsurprisingly.
And there's always you're reminding me of that one graphic that always comes out on Facebook and starts making the rounds in all the pollinator groups, probably in end of February, early March, and it's like the top 9 plants for bees, and I think maybe 1 or 2 or 3 of them are native, but dandelion's always on that list. What do you think about dandelion as a early season pollinator plant or bee plant? Because it's always touted as being, don't get rid of the dandelions in your lawn or in your yard.
Right.
But I've heard
if you're dealing with the lawn universe, then dandelions are great, right? Because if you're committed to having a lawn, your options are relatively few. You can integrate in some other kinds of plants, but not a whole lot. Like you can introduce white clover, another non-native. Bees go to that. Bees go to dandelions, but they're particularly whenever you think about this, a general rule of thumb is if it's not native, it's not supporting that much. It's more of a you might get bees on yellow sweet clover is a good example, white clover, dandelions, but it's more of a 7-Eleven kind of situation. I got a lot of nectar, I got some pollen, I'm going to support a bunch of the hoodlum, bees that are common everywhere, and the bees, the sensitive, specialist bees that are only going to willow, but they're SOL on those.
Yeah.
But if you have a lawn, then go wild, plant it all in dandelions. It's not a problem. Just don't bring that way of thinking to now I'm going to seed bomb dandelions into field habitats and naturalized landscapes. You want to extract that out there and use the complexity of already existing and availability of already existing native plants in those environments and build that up and get rid of the yellow sweet clover and the white clover and move in the many other kinds of things that you could, or which is a better strategy, is to dial down as much as possible those invasives. One way is to try and dig everything up and get rid of all the invasives and just come up with this very clean landscape that's invasive free. But that's really not realistic, and you may be doing more damage than good sometimes. It's better to just come in with your brush hooks and weed whips and things and edit out and knock back the competition to favor the natives in those kinds of environments.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there's never one answer in all these kinds of things. So in a lawn, dandelion's great. Elsewhere, nope, don't want them.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that you hear a lot about is decline of bees. Mm-hmm. Is there one category that's affected most? Are specialists more in danger because they're specialists? Is it decline? Is it being unfairly cast over the whole genus of bee?
And I'll even ask too, because a lot of people, when they talk about the decline of bees, again, automatically think of honeybees, like we were mentioning earlier. I'm assuming that's the case with. Well, I know it's the case with native bees as well. Is it more drastic with native bees than it is honeybees?
So first of all, honeybees have a separate set of issues, and they have their population changes are in most ways divorced from the issues that are going on for the native species.
Okay.
So a lot of native species are unaffected by all the problems that honeybees have in terms of the honeybee diseases are so keyed in on these very weird, highly specialized bees that don't have analogs in our native fauna that it actually works out well from the native bees point of view.
Okay.
Is that we don't get a lot of bleed over of honeybee problems. So native bee problems tend still to be associated with plants. Loss of habitat, again, no willow bees. Mm-hmm. You can go down this long list and ask, here's a list of the specialist bees. How are their plants doing? We'll give you an answer to how those bees are doing. But other than that, where I can absolutely tell you that native bees have declined because I know that their habitats have declined. Mm-hmm. But on top of that, I can't give you any other information really because we don't have a monitoring program. So we have some really coarse level stuff like, who is, BX, who's seen that in the last, 30 years? And it might be no one, but you know what? They may not have ever looked on the plant that it likes or been in the right place at the right time. There is literally just handfuls of people looking for these native bees. So how would you know? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the state, which is really lousy. And so a lot of people in the media in particular are really ready to call the decline of bees. But the nuance is that it's all habitat and all wild plants and animals are suffering equally because it's going back. And then everything else becomes a inspection of the details. Are we, for example, planting too many trees? Mm-hmm. So a lot of these bees use plants that occur in meadows. And if everybody's looking to plant a tree somewhere, well, that's not very balanced, right? Because a lot of our landscapes have traditionally had big chunks of open landscape in them, and now we're either going towards mature forest as our goal, or we're going to, lawn, suburban anthropogenic kinds of habitats. What we are losing is that sort of natural transitional habitats, successional habitats where things are burned or used or grazed or, our farm landscapes used to provide that all the time because things were logged or sheep were allowed in and then taken away. But now we're just too efficient. So I have great concerns, even though I don't have the data, that we're losing some components of bees, but I don't have any evidence about that they're gone, because if you don't look, you don't you don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure if you monitored like the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, you would probably see a lot less. You would think, because that doesn't change too often, and it's you would think there would be a lot less loss there compared to somewhere else.
Yeah,
but,
like even still in the Pine Barrens, but you got close to the shore where it is more developed, and you went from natural habitat to parking lots and houses, and
because even the fringes, if they're affected, affect it. So it's I'm sure it would change just area to area, even small, like
right
distances.
Well, the Pine Barrens, suffer from lack of fire. That was a habitat that burned all the time. From Native American communities, used that to manipulate those environments to, basically the crappy farmlands that were there that would wink in and wink out, and the colonists who were just inefficient. And then you had large grazing animals that are gone, and so on and so forth. And now we're just planting it into pine or letting it become pine.
Yeah.
And we really need to light some matches out there, fellas.
It's funny because even a lot of the restorations that we see aren't the proper restorations. They're restoring it to what it was 10 or 20 years ago, but what it was 10 years ago, wasn't what it was 30 or 40 years ago. There's just so many channels in which it's changed. What's the and some things that can't be reversed, unfortunately, where things have been dammed up, or it was freshwater and now it's brackish. There's so much damage has been done over so many centuries. What really is the proper restoration? It's almost hard to tell. Like what period of time are you trying to restore, and what's really best for the pollinators or the bees?
Yeah. Moving target. But just, what's the last time that you heard a bobwhite quail in the Pine Barrens?
Yeah.
And then if you go back to when the colonists came, that area had heath hens, which are greater prairie chickens living in them.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I had the conversation with a customer just the other day. I was trying to think back the last time I saw a pheasant. I grew up in Bucks County, PA, and I think the last time was probably like 1989. The habitat just doesn't even exist anymore where they were, and it's and it's all where it was farm. It's all McMansions now, so it's or forests. So
and the farms are too clean.
Yeah,
so you don't have. There's no weeds. There's no insects left. It's row crop, and they're very efficient to make great amount of yield per acre, which is important for the world. It means less wild habitats are plowed up to support the same people, but you're not going to get bobwhite and pheasant anymore because there's nothing for them to eat. And then the farmers are too clean cultivating and herbiciding out the edges of the farm plots. Ditches are cleaned out, all that kind of stuff.
And unfortunately, even if
it's just one model.
Yeah, even if you're raising them in captivity, one of our customers was trying to raise quail in captivity, and he was saying that the unfortunate problem was as soon as he released them, they would climb right up a telephone pole, and hawks were just like picking them off. He's like, they were gone within hours of releasing them. Like they just didn't know how to survive. Yeah.
Raising quail or pheasant is not a successful strategy. Pretty much end of topic. If you want to put them out, if you want to put them out and then shoot them right away, which is what these hunting preserves do,
exactly,
to provide their sporting experience, that's fine. But you're not going to. You have to deal with the core problem, which is the habitats no longer can support these kinds of environments. And you need a lot for to have quail. It's not just like, well, my farm, my 250 acres, not enough. You need square miles upon square miles of good habitat to support the populations long term. but it's just an indicator that we've moved from an environment with lots of early successional habitats and open, weedy pasture things to a much more used environment or wooded. Mm-hmm. And so we have to, I think, be careful about overplanting trees or devaluing open land, because there's still lots and lots of plants and critters, particularly in a place like the Pine Barrens, that have traditionally been open country to a large extent because of this disturbance factor and the fact that you are dealing with sugar sands. But eventually everything, because we have a lot of rain, will become trees if you remove the disturbance factors and you put out every single fire.
Yeah, I mean, even a meadow wants to become a forest if you leave it alone.
Yeah, in the east, we're not prairies; they're just temporary meadows.
There's
Something
just too much rain. Back. Yeah. Now, are we? Do you think that we're too far gone for a solution for this? Do you think that we're at a point where we can't fix what has already been broken?
No. I think most of these bee species are around in small pockets. So remember, they're tiny. So if you have a small patch of Lysimachias, some of the oil-bearing loose stripes, you can still find the now very difficult to find bees that specialize on those. Okay. So we just have to be more conscious that as landowners, property owners, and managers of state and county lands and highway managers, that mowing or planting trees is not the only solution, and we're going to have to be a little more nuanced. You may still spend just the same amount of money, but you're going to have to get people, which is a good thing, right, who know more about plants to come in and say, you know what we want to do here is just do a once a year mow to set back the woody plants, and then we want to do targeted herbiciding of invasives or brush cutting or whatever it is of the rest. But someone has to be able to understand that that's an invasive species, and so it's different from either herbiciding everything or mowing everything. We're just going to have to be smarter about it, and then you have to start taking into consideration that we need to bring back big chunks of the plant community that are getting squeezed out just by our society's preferences, or society. In some ways, it's not even a preference. It's simply it's easy to just walk away from a field and it'll just become trees and that looks good. Yeah. Or let's ignore all the fact that fields are full of autumn olive and bush honeysuckles, and it's green, and that's good, right?
Yeah, it's Bradford pear or Callery pear, and it looks great when it flowers.
Exactly.
So
I'm dealing with Callery pear right here all the time, so I know that legacy.
So Sam, I want to kick it back a little bit. You were talking about the specialist bees on chestnuts and chinkapins. I actually knew about what you're talking about a little bit because I was on your guys' Facebook page or Facebook group earlier, and the pictures you put up of those bees were obviously fantastic. How do those pictures help your research?
Well, it's interesting because those pictures are an amalgamation of somewhere between 25 and 150 individual shots, and that allows us to get a completely in focus, super detailed shot that will blow up to the size of the wall. And they're all public domain, by the way, so you can grab whatever you want. The reason we started down that road is we were interested in developing an online museum that had a lot of detail of these bees, because regular museums have been closing, and people like my colleagues who are identifying bees, you can use these word keys that go through a set of characters to separate out the different species. But in the end, if you had a collection of bees, you would take your bee and compare it to the others and say, yep, looks like it, or no way, that totally doesn't look like the rest of them. So we wanted that kind of level of photography so that people, when they're doing their identifications at the end, they could compare their specimen to some known bees, at least online.
Okay.
But at the same time, if I was going to go to all this trouble, just because I end up doing a lot of the photoshopping, our teams here do this, a lot of the volunteers do a lot of the picture taking. It's got to look pretty because I want to work on. It's just a completely selfish thing. I want to work on beautiful looking bees and make them as beautiful as possible because it feeds my soul. I don't want some raggedy ass bee photography just because the specimen happens to be the right species. So we're washing and drying. We have a little station that's like a bee beauty salon, and we spend a lot of time, more than necessary, to just get the job done, to make these things beautiful. The secondary impact has been that it's completely not my thought, because I thought I'm just providing these to my a tiny set of colleagues who want to look at these for ID. But it turns out that when you do these pictures of beautiful bees, that I'm not the only person who thinks they're beautiful. And so we get a lot of attention from the public because we put them up on Flickr because it's an easy place to share photography. And it went from there. And now, we have millions upon millions of views and thousands of followers. And we use it as a platform to blog about these bees and tell stories like the chestnut story, and to tell them about all the different kinds of varieties. And we really encourage people to follow us we're on Instagram, Flickr, Facebook, and Tumblr, where you'll see these stories about these bees that you're never going to hear about because everything's
and I'll second that everyone who's listening to this should go and follow these accounts because it really is just amazing.
And we're going to share the links on our webpage when we post this, so to make sure everyone can get to all those easily. But I had shared the Flickr page with my fiance, and after being completely blown away by the photos, the first thing she noticed was the amount. She was impressed with how many followers on Flickr there was. She's like, wow, look at the amount of people that have already found this and are already following this. And that's great when you have a tool that just is so great that it's drawing the public to it to help you with the cause. I mean,
and they're also used a lot because everything is public domain. In fact, we say right in our profile on Flickr, where you get the highest resolution photographs, the originals can be downloaded from there, like, don't bother us by asking us for permission. We're going to say yes, and we don't care. We want you to use this, and you can print them out and sell them, which people do, and you can modify them. You can use them for advertising, and also in your educational components. You can put them on signs. We're going to say yes, and we encourage you to do that. And so that's kind of makes us special too, because you can just grab our stuff, and who doesn't want that?
Exactly.
We see our pictures everywhere, and a lot of times they've been so replicated that there's like not a thread back to us, but we can tell. Like, we know that picture.
Yeah,
fun.
I was going to say, I don't know that
it.
too many other people are doing photos like that of that detail, the detail is just astounding. It's overwhelming almost.
There's a little OCD component there. I'm not going to say that's not the case, but it works.
I completely appreciate the OCD component. That's a big component of my everyday life. So I appreciate that. So Tom, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, you can.
No.
All right. I know we talked about honeybees a lot, but I know there's some research being done about basically about honeybees and how they impact native bees negatively. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, there has been a lot of more recent information on impacts of honeybees. So just some background. Honeybees are part of a group of bees, very similar, and that they produce comb and store nectar product as honey over years. Almost all of those are Asian species. They're always colonial. One species has made it over to Europe and Africa, and that's our European honeybee. Then the colonists, almost right away, 1600s, they brought over honeybees over to here. All the Americas have no honeybees. The honeybee life history is radically different from anything that we have on this continent as a native bee species. So they're a very poor model for how our native bees are working. So I tell people, like anything you know about honeybees, you need to forget, because we're working a very different system. And so that's the context there for that. But that's what people know. People know honeybees. They hear a lot of honeybees are declining, our bees are declining. They then make that jump because of this lack of information to, well, we're going to need to bring in honeybees or support honeybees. So ecologically, though, that's a kind of an inappropriate response. So honeybees are very useful and necessary in certain commercial kinds of pollination activities. They also are the only thing that you're going to find that produces honey. So if you want honey, you have to have honeybees. But if you also want honey, you could buy honey that's imported from all these other countries too. So it's not a necessity. They are also very cool. I mean, there's these huge colonies which have this really fascinating life history, and they do things you're just not going to see anywhere else. That's another reason to have honeybees, is if you just love that complexity. But if you are concerned about the environment and the ecology and want to save the bees, then as a homeowner or a small landowner, bringing in honeybees or becoming a beekeeper, that is not a useful thing ecologically, because for a couple of reasons. One, they are competitors with native bees. So you can think there's X amount of pollen and nectar. Honeybees are incredibly efficient, and they also grab as much nectar as they can to create honey, which is their storage product. And they're basically vacating a lot of the floral resources in any particular area because they're so good at it.
Okay.
And so that means automatically you're starving out a set of bees by the native species by doing that. Additionally, if you aren't necessarily interested in saving just native bees, but you're interested in saving honeybees, you're having and providing ground for a small set of honeybees is doing nothing to save the species of honeybees. So honeybees' issues have to do with pathogens and the intersection and digitization of loss of habitat, and also pesticides and herbicides, because a lot of times honeybees are purposefully placed in agricultural systems, and that it's complicated and somewhat controversial, but certainly pesticides are, insecticides in particular, but also herbicides and also fungicides have components that will kill honeybees. So you stress them out no matter how you look at it, and then all these other introduced pathogens are decreasing the numbers and types of honeybees. But But an individual person who's not a professional, who's not part of, raising these things commercially, having another honeybee hive is not adding to the saving of honeybees. It's competing with the native bee species. So ecologically, I can't be an advocate for anyone to bring in honeybees in any kind of circumstances, because it's not necessary. So we have all the pollination we need from our native bee species, who of course grew up with all the native plants, and they also leak over and will do the pollination of your garden, of your community garden, of your orchards. So none of the orchards in the eastern United States, for example, need honeybees, because the native bees will move in and do the pollination there. You have to get into really industrial levels of plants that have no surrounding native habitat in which the native bees can be called in from before you have to actually bring in honeybees to affect pollination. So those are a set of factors to weigh. If you want honeybees, just like if you want to, have dogs and cats, knock yourself out. But if you think you're doing it because you're helping the world, it's the opposite. You're actually part of the problem doing that. So that's my soapbox on that. I think they're cool, but I don't keep them, and I buy my honey from the store. Mm-hmm. So
and we're already talking about
generally discourage that.
We're already talking about loss of habitat. So you have these competing species working on less and less to forage off of.
Yeah. I think the main issue is that people think they're doing a good thing a lot of times by having honeybees, and they're actually not. And a lot of people are paying other people to bring in honeybees to their property because it's saving the bees. But again, it's not saving honeybees really, because you're not doing anything that solves the problem, and you're competing then with all the native bee species. So once people kind of realize that, then it's pretty obvious that the solution is to not do those kinds of things, not bring honeybees into native naturalized landscapes. But who knows that? I mean, there's so little information out there about the non-honeybee bees, because culturally no one does movies about them and make cute little figurines and have Winnie the Pooh, or we can go on and on with all the imagery that's associated with the introduced European honeybee. I mean, you also have to think that when you have honeybees in your backyard, those honeybees are not staying in your backyard. They're impacting all your neighbors. It's as if you introduced fighting dogs and then just let them roam around the neighborhood at the same time. You would not do that, or hogs or cattle or chickens. You have to be respectful of other people's landscapes too, who may not be interested in having honeybees, but you basically inflict them on an entire mile radius around your hives.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I was going to say, Sam, it might have been you who was the one that said this, but my wife's an English teacher, and she's going to get upset if I don't get this right. But it's either metaphor or a simile. I don't remember which one. But you compared honeybees basically to cattle. They were cows in a way, and an agricultural system versus native bees, which are wild and not cattle.
Yeah, honeybees are a commodity. They're actually regulated and tended to at the federal level by USDA and USGS, where I work. We're on the non-commodity wild plant and animal side of things. So they produce a food product. So you have people who look at the raising of bees and are concerned about those things, and they're tracked a lot better than the native bees, which are essentially not tracked at all.
I think probably that maybe honeybees are tracked because people are making money off of them. It's a source of income for some of these people. So if there's a decline in income, there's cause for concern.
You would think so, but I think mostly it's a federal USDA statistics of agriculture kind of thing. So I think if people were not making any money at all on them, then they probably wouldn't track it. But there's interest in numbers of colonies from just a regulatory kind of viewpoint, because they have to justify the effort that's gone into looking at them to see if there's any problems with supply and demand and the numbers of honeybees in the world.
Okay, it's if there, and I don't even know if this is possible, and I think we've probably already touched on it. If there was just one singular point, and I don't know if that's even possible, that could just instantly get across to the general public when it comes to native bees. Is there one singular point that everyone or one thing that everyone could do that would just change or help help change?
Yeah, I mean, it's really clear. You don't really have to know that much about native bees. What you do need to know is that they require blooming native plants. So the more you shift whatever your landscape is, whether it's your quarter-acre lot, or it's your farm, or it's your vacation home, to supporting a wide variety of native plants that bloom, that's the key to saving bees. And if you have a lawn, shame on you, because that should all be blooming plants. And you have to.
That will be a tough paradigm.
It drives me crazy to see these 30-acre lawns in front of someone's house.
The funny thing is with the next generation, like my kids look at the upkeeping of people taking care of lawns, and they're like, we don't want to do that. we right. Why are we doing this? And it's I think it's funny as the next generation is coming. Like, the dream was, 30 years ago, or the last generation, you want to move out of the city, you want to move and have a big lawn, you want a big house, a big car. I think that's shifting again a little bit. Like, my kids look at it and we're like, why do we have this? Because we have an area in the back that's wetlands. They're like, we like that much better. We don't have to take care of it. It just kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah, I want to see that kind of complexity and enjoy all those different patterns and those blooms. And we have this problem sometimes that people have no idea what the wild plants are. And so if you don't know, just like if you don't know what the wild native bees are, how can you appreciate them?
Exactly.
And if we don't know what's an invasive plant and what the different characters and why these flowers are in different places in their life history and their natural histories, even their uses, we don't have people who are using a lot of these native plants like they would in the past for medicinal uses or food, then it just becomes something that's green. And, it's not dirt, so we're good. Check that box.
So Sam,
I should point out that for native bees, there are a bunch of native bees that love basically piles of dirt, or open soil, or embankments that are cut open. That for some bees, again, we have many different kinds of species, and each of them has their preferences. Some of those bees love upturned tree root masses. They love cut banks. They love stream edges. They love there's even bees that prefer to be on beaten down pathways in the dirt. They want hard packed soil. So if you have the opportunity in your lawn, garden, the places that you use to leave a back corner just open, or have a pile of dirt, or some place that doesn't want to grow anything, that's great. That's a good nesting site.
And that's all things that I think people see and want to get rid of or fix, but it doesn't need to be fixed.
Right. Yeah. Nope. No.
So Sam, as we're starting to wrap up here, one thing I think would be remiss if we didn't ask you about, just because it's a work of art, is your car. The first time, actually at Millersville when we were talking earlier, I actually parked right next to you, and I got out and I took a picture because I was like, this is the coolest thing I've seen. This thing is just amazing. And I didn't know it was your car at the time until I saw you at the Ecological Landscape Association event in Delaware, and parked right next to that same car again. And then when we were leaving, I saw you get in and drive away, and I'm like, oh, it makes so much sense now that was right, your car.
Yeah.
What's the story of your car?
Well, I guess I have always painted my vehicles. Initially, it was just to keep them from rusting out, and I would just use house paint or spray something on it. And then I was like, oh, if I've gotten over the can't touch my beautiful or not beautiful paint finish, then why not have a little fun here? And now I'm going to paint the shark on the side of the truck. And it just got worse and worse, and now I have pop riveted a bunch of copper scales to the front of the car. I've got a fin on the top that is, in this particular version is a dragon head, and And I first of all, I totally enjoy that because I'm driving a 1990s Saturn. So what kind of car is that? To like you could do anything to that car and it'll be a grade up at this point after 20 years. But one of the best things is that I say that I can drive anywhere and people will smile. Like you were talking about, I'm going to take a picture of that. When I drive down the road, people are smiling, and they would not do that if I was driving a 20-year-old Saturn. So I kind of look at it as my, just by driving back and forth to work, my karma levels are going way up.
And
no one's going to steal it.
I'm smiling just thinking about it, actually, because when Tom like showed pictures and just he was like talking about the chains with the bells and it's just you can't help but to smile. That's not like, and it's something I never thought of. I'm like, but why don't I have one of those? Like, maybe,
oh my God,
maybe we could start a new trend.
Yeah. Well, people are so uptight about it. They'll let it go to hell, with paint peeling and all kinds of, who knows what going on. But, you say, well, why don't you, people make comments and say, hey, why don't you do that to your car? Like, oh, no, the resale value. And it's, I just go to Sherwin-Williams or another, paint shop and get the off-the-shelf metal enamel paint. And, I play around with a little line tape sometimes, or other times I'm just freehand it. It's super easy to do.
All right. That's my next goal.
There you go.
All right. So we always end the podcast with the same final question, and we've expanded it only because the topics that we've dealt with are so diverse. It's kind of hard to narrow this down just to native plants because we've kind of gone in all directions. But we like to ask what your favorite native plant is, but you can instead of or include a favorite bird, and I guess we should include a bee. Yeah. So you can do one of each, or you can just choose one, whatever you want to choose.
Right. Well, I have many favorite native plants because I'm constantly looking at them because that's how I find my bees. And so right now I'm doing a lot with Lysimachias. So those would be the native loosestrifes, not the purple loosestrifes. I'm particularly in the area, we've got a lot of world loosestrife and what's the other? Fringed loosestrife. And they have a bee that's very rare now. Macropus doesn't have a common name, but it's an oil. It uses oils. So these flowers produce oils instead of, or in addition to nectar. I'm not sure which. And these bees require these oils to feed to their young. And it turns out that I have both the world loosestrife and the bee, which is only the second place I've ever found them at all, right here on this 30-acre compound. So now I've started cultivating them and managing my landscape, and we'll be doing more and more studies of them. And I'm really enjoying the loosestrifes as a plant, to pay attention to.
And I think that's a great example because people hear loosestrife and they think of the invasive species and they forget about the native species. So it's Lysimachia, not Lythrum.
Right.
The same. Do you have a final thought that you'd like to wrap up with and send everyone home with?
I guess my only final thought would be to emphasize that native bee conservation is the conservation of native plants. And the greater the diversity of native plants that you maintain, the more benefit you're going to be doing to native bees, even if you don't know what the species of native bees might be.
All right, awesome.
How about you, Fran?
I learned a lot today.
Yeah.
I really did. It's overwhelming. It's
I have a lot of final thoughts.
It's hard because I didn't even knowing so little about this topic, not even thinking how well it ties into the things I know about, and just it makes me look at things that I thought I knew differently already. It just amazes me like that that it never ceases to amaze me how much I keep learning about this and how much I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's...
Well, you guys already know so much, really, in a way, because you know so much about native plants. And most people, including a lot of the bee researchers, are very weak on their, abilities to identify and know the characteristics and the habitats of these native plants, and have a degree of plant blindness themselves when they walk around. So you just need to be, sort of ramp up a little bit about some of the bee stuff, and then if you follow us, you'll hear stories about like, oh, daughter has these really interesting bees on it, or a lot of stuff like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about the fact that spring beauties have their own bee and it's being taken over by lesser celandine, and it adds a whole additional level to the conservation of native plants. Another reason to plant native plants, other than like wave the flag, they're American plants, and of course we want the natives to. They're supporting bees and many other insects that we don't think about, and they're really the foundation for most of the life in the area.
I just know that the next time I go back outside and I'm looking at birds or plants, I'm going to look at everything differently now. And it's, I don't necessarily get drawn to looking at the bees, but I will now. And it's just, you just keep looking further into, it's like this picture that you focus on, and all of a sudden you see a whole different picture. And that's how I kind of feel about this the more I learn.
Yeah.
Tom.
Well, get a pair of butterfly binoculars. There's a Pentax one that's like $100.
Okay.
And they focus
writing it down right now.
18 inches and at 8 power. And if you're at 18 inches and 8 power, you can see a lot that you would not be able to see, with your naked eye. Your naked eye just can't resolve all these, interesting little facets of native bees.
Yeah.
They're too small.
Well,
Most of the average native bee in any landscape is the size of a grain of rice.
Yeah, and it's it's funny because I was actually just looking at binoculars over the weekend, and I didn't know where to start, so now I know where actually. So
and
that's perfect.
Those Pentax butterfly binoculars, I use them for bird watching too. So it's not like you have to get one thing or another.
And that's why we were looking at them actually. Like if we were to get like bird binoculars, and that's what. So that's all right. I wrote it down too, so I know what I'm doing after we're done today. Tom, do you have a final thought?
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I really enjoy every summer is just we put native gardens in front of our house, and I love just looking at all, not just the bees, but all the insects and birds that forage and feed on them. But we have a wild area behind our seed farm. It's a Green Acres parcel that's pretty much been untouched in the last probably 60 to 80 years. And I can't wait to go out there and start looking at some of the stuff that's blooming there for native bees, because I hadn't even thought about going out there and looking at some of this stuff that isn't necessarily a garden plant, but it still blooms, and I'm sure bees are still using it. But I might have to borrow your binoculars if I don't get a pair myself.
I will lend them to you. I'm surprised you don't have a pair.
Yeah.
I thought you had a pair for some reason.
So I have a pair of binoculars, not butterfly binoculars.
Okay, all right, good.
But Sam, one last thing before we end things. How can people get involved and help you guys out?
Right now, we are overwhelmed. So we don't get a lot of funding. I have a bunch of volunteers. If you're local, you can get in touch with me, and we'll get you in here raising a bunch of native plants, once the virus thing calms down. So we're raising lots of plants. We're doing a lot of things with that. We have things in the laboratory that need to be done. If we ever get more help, then we'll need more people to go out and look at bees and catch bees. But right now, I just can't keep up with what we've got. So
gotcha.
Mostly it's a local thing.
Yep. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed listening to Sam Droege and learning about the native bee inventory. Thank you, everyone, again. We really appreciate all the feedback and support you guys have given us. Keep on listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast presented by Pinelands Nursery.
And thank you, Sam. I appreciate you coming on. This has been wonderful. So we also want to thank Stephen Marr again for our theme music. Thank you for contributing that. You can follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, on Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at Pinelands Nursery, and our YouTube channel, which is Pinelands Nursery.
You can listen to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast directly at www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. You can also listen to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, or you can just ask Alexa to play the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast. Make sure you're following, liking, comment, and review. You don't need to review. You did that earlier when you paused. When you paused us to do that. But thanks again for joining us. I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Thanks again, everyone. Make sure you check out the website so you can follow the great links to all the things we talked about today. We will see you next time, and until then, keep it native.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.